If you have a hard time with boundaries, how might your life be different if you could say no as easily as a joyful yes? I'm Love Coach Mariya, and for over a decade now, I've been encouraging folks to empower their compassion so it's big enough for ourselves as well as others, and so our boundaries can become healthier than ever. You're listening to Empower Your Compassion, and on this show, we'll be unlocking transformative insights to help you reconnect to your true yes, so you can say no from that more expansive energy and get more of what you want in your relationships and your life without sacrificing your compassion. Are you ready for more love? Let's grow. Hello, gorgeous. I'm so glad you're here. The holidays are upon us, and it's such a challenging time for a lot of couples and for single folks. I know that there's a lot that comes up at this time of year, a lot of potential for beauty and love and connection, and also a lot of potential for stress and loneliness and conflict. It's a very charged time of year. And I want to talk a little bit about balance. I think balance is really, really important in pretty much all aspects of life. We have such a tendency to, swing the pendulum from one extreme to the other, or set up camp in one extreme or the other. And one way that can show up in relationships is like this rugged individualism on one side, or this like enmeshed codependence on the other side. And in fact, one of the reasons this podcast is named Empower Your Compassion is because it's really important for both empowerment and compassion to serve each other. If you have total empowerment with no compassion, you're probably going to be a dick. And if you've got total compassion and empathy but no empowerment, you're going to get walked all over. And the problem, honestly, I used to feel like I didn't really understand when people would say to me that, oh, you're letting people take advantage of you, or you're being walked all over. And I was like, I don't feel like I'm giving anything. I don't want to. But the problem was that on a subconscious level, I was giving everything I thought I needed to in order to feel accepted and like that belonging that can really only come from authentic alignment. And what I didn't realize was that I was stepping out of alignment all the time, abandoning myself all the time in order to receive morsels, crumbs of acceptance and belonging. And when you're living in that, barely subsistence level of love and connection, it becomes this perpetuating problem because you fear abandonment and rejection naturally as social creatures. And then so when you abandon yourself in order to prevent others from abandoning you, you keep that wound open and festering. And in that self-abandonment, you're contorting yourself to try and win the approval and acceptance of others. But if you get it, they're only accepting this masked version of you that you've presented in order to receive that acceptance. And eventually, the real you is going to come out, and it won't be quite as accepted because that wasn't the deal that was made. And then you're going to feel like it's reinforcing this notion that the real you isn't good enough. And so you continue to self-abandon. And or you, on some level, you start to feel like you're not really being seen or accepted for who you truly are because you're not showing up as your true self. So it can just become this self-perpetuating problem, and it's scary. I know that it's scary. I've been there. I've done it. But what we have to do is learn how to brave the risk of rejection in order to finally receive the love and acceptance and belonging of our true selves. In one of my most impactful relationships, early on, I could tell that he wasn't going to meet my needs. And I was just going to be like, yeah, you know what? I don't think this is a fit. And I was about to leave. And I stopped myself and I recognized this was a pattern. I've been here before. And the pattern that I was recognizing was being attracted to and getting into a relationship with people who weren't really going to meet my needs. And, you know, you do something enough times, you start to identify that it's a pattern. And for someone like me, maybe like you, I tend to be really into personal growth and development. So I've developed a habit of introspection. And so once I noticed the pattern, I was like, it appears that I have some relationship issues. And I've done a lot of work on myself, by myself. It seems like I'm probably going to need to be in relationship where these things get triggered so that they get brought up to the surface for me to work on. So I think maybe instead of leaving, which has been my pattern, and on a side note, my pattern was usually to stay too long and then leave. So I commend myself for catching it earlier this time, but I still didn't really understand why we were misaligned. And so what I decided to try and do differently, well, like I said, was sort of like lean in a little bit differently to these challenges. And instead of seeing the challenge as an option to stay or go, I took it as an opportunity to grow. And what I ended up doing was examining the needs that I felt that weren't getting met. And what I discovered was that it was essentially needs for reassurance and ultimately validation. And I knew that validation was something that we do need from outside sources, you know? I mean, that's why scientists write peer-reviewed papers. Or if, you know, you're on a street corner and you see something crazy, is that a bird? Is it a plane? Is it Superman? You want to ask the person next to you to check if your perception is correct. So when it comes to ideas or perceptions, it is really helpful to have an outside perspective, a second opinion, some external validation. However, in this realm of personal development, when we talk about validation, and especially in close, intimate relationships, when we're talking about validation, what's most important is two things: validating our self-worth and validating our emotional experiences. Because both of these things are truly internally sourced, no one else can really validate those for you. You have to validate them for yourself. You have to say, I'm having an emotional experience and it's valid because I'm having it. I'm feeling sad, valid. I'm feeling angry, valid. Like, anyone can take issue with what you do, your actions. Your actions may or may not be acceptable by your own standards to someone else, etc. However, your emotional experiences are always valid. And just because you're the only one who can validate them, it doesn't mean that someone else can't invalidate them in a way that has you question them. If you don't have a solid, internally rooted security. But even then, again, because we're social creatures, if someone else gaslights you or diminishes or does all kinds of different tactics that invalidate your emotional experience, it can have an impact on you, even on a subconscious level. If, you know, consciously you're like, no, that's BS. We can't subject ourselves to that kind of invalidation on a regular, consistent basis and not have our subconscious impacted by it. It's just like any other subliminal programming. When we receive something often enough, our minds take it in. So as I was learning about the importance of self-validation and rising to the challenge of practicing acceptance of this other person who basically said, hey, look, I've shown you who I am, kind of take it or leave it was the implication, coupled with mentioning that he hadn't asked me to make any changes explicitly. At that point, I decided that it was feeling good that was acknowledging what that acceptance was feeling like and decided that I could practice the same. But it was a one-way thing for a long time. It was just me constantly trying to adjust myself to accept him as he was and stay in relationship with him. Flash forward years later, and he wasn't actually very accepting. He was just a lot more subtle about his preferences for how I might show up differently. And like I said, those got into my psyche, and I'm a very consciously aware and understanding person. I knew when he was being triggered. I knew what his coping strategies were. I knew that they were dysfunctional, but I felt like he deserved to be loved. And so I took it upon myself to find a way to do that, to go on loving him and being in support of him. What I eventually realized is that love is unconditional. Relationships are not. And that's what boundaries are for. But for those of us who come from that extremist conditioning of all or nothing, rugged individualism, enmeshed codependence, and seeing the world as those are our only two options, those spiked walls or flimsy fences, saying no too harshly, saying yes too often, we lose track of the balance in between. I call those types of boundaries selective gates. And that's where, again, we can love unconditionally and have conditions on our relationships. And so we can clarify, like, hey, here is a gate for how we can connect. These types of behaviors are not acceptable. I'm not available for them. But this type of connection or communication is open. But again, getting from A to B, getting from those extremes to that balance is really challenging to overcome on the nervous system, on, the mind, body, spirit. And that's why I developed the GATES method. It stands for ground, assess, trust, express, and steward. And if you want to learn more about it, you can go to boundariesthatfeelgood.com and download a jam-packed free guide. It's an 8-page PDF, like my magnum opus that I have put together as a free gift to anyone who's interested in learning these things, because I really am on a mission to empower compassion. I want more people to be more loving with others and themselves so that we can live in a more loving world. And it takes healthy boundaries in order to have thriving relationships. That partner and I did eventually end up parting ways. In fact, I essentially single-handedly consciously uncoupled us. And I took about a year to do it because I was really committed to staying in alignment with my values and goals about being in integrity with loving myself and him. And I didn't want to blow things up. We have shared friends. We have a nonprofit together. We have other arrangements. We have a friendship underneath it. And I wanted to be able to preserve that. And I did. And I'm really proud of that. I think most people would have thrown labels at him: narcissist, abusive, never physical, and moderately emotional. But I also kind of knew what I was getting into every time I kept going back in. It was because I knew that I had more room for growth. I don't necessarily recommend it for anyone else. Essentially, what I realized in retrospect, where hindsight's 20/20, is that I was right early on when I detected the misalignment, but I was wrong about why. I thought it was because he wasn't going to support me, meet me in a basically codependent dynamic. But the truth is that we're aligned because we don't have compatible relationship styles. And that's the peace I made in the end with ending things. I was like, I had spent so much time practicing acceptance of him when really I was still trying to contort myself to meet him where he was at, and eventually feeling resentful and trying to get him to change. So I was effectively asking both of us to step out of alignment. And when I really learned that A, love is acceptance, and B, accepting him, really accepting him for who he was and where he was at, and really accepting me for who I was and where I was at, his capacity to show up, his capacity for emotional availability and processing and repair, and my needs for those didn't meet. They weren't aligned. And so for me to really accept him for where he was, and for me to really accept me for where I was, meant acknowledging that we were not compatible, that we were misaligned. And it didn't mean that there was anything wrong with him. And it didn't mean that there was anything wrong with me. That was really hard to come to terms with. I kept thinking that there was something wrong with me, that if I couldn't show up for him, could I show up for myself? If I couldn't stay in relationship and make it work, would I maybe not be able to make it work with anyone? Was I broken? Was there something wrong with me? And ultimately, of course, the answer is no. There's nothing wrong with us unless we think there is. And if we think there is, then we're going to continue to put ourselves in situations that are going to prove us right. So again, I've got this Gates method that makes it a lot easier to connect to our own needs and limits and communicate about them in ways that have the potential to really enhance relationships if the other person is willing and able to meet you in that. And ultimately, though, helps strengthen your relationship with yourself. And from that space, you're able to create stronger relationships, either with the people who are currently in your life, or it will clarify how you might want to shift your role in those relationships or make some alterations to those dynamics. And it'll create space for people who are more aligned with you to come in. Because when you're really honest about your needs and limits, you'll find people who can meet you there. But when you're not, you won't. And so now, on the other side of finally learning healthy and loving boundaries, I'm no longer shrinking. If I'm honest, I'm still working on it. There's still some residue. I'm still finding little ways that I shrink and hide. And it might be a lifelong journey, but I'm improving. And I'm certainly not shrinking in any romantic relationships right now. I aspire to a healthy romantic relationship, but I know now my patterns and how to avoid falling into those old patterns. And even outside of romance, I have an increasingly fulfilling friendship circle too. Prior to learning healthy boundaries, I had a lot of friends that weren't aligned. Like I thought I wanted to be their friend and I thought I wanted them in my life, and maybe they did, but I was doing a lot of chasing. You're always the one to reach out and follow up. And then there was a couple friendships where another friend very kindly suggested, maybe you're their B friend. And I was like, oh my gosh, I think you're right. And I didn't take it personal. I was just like, oh, wow, yeah, maybe I just need to dial back my expectations and my level of involvement to kind of more match theirs. And sure enough, those friendships just fell away when I wasn't carrying them anymore. And now that I am building the bravery to really be me and show up as me, and here's the really important thing, and be okay with the people who aren't for me or who I'm not for. It's so hard. It's so hard as like a recovering people pleaser to be okay with people not being pleased with you. But it's so worth it. It's so worth it. Like it's the amount of scary and discomfort is so small compared to the joy and fulfillment of finding people who really are aligned with you. And I'm slowly, intentionally, consciously growing my network of really aligned people in my life. And I'm designing my life, the things that I do and the spaces that I occupy and the way that I show up, everything is just in so much more increasing alignment and therefore fulfillment, all because I have better boundaries, all because I know I'm really connected now to what I'm a yes to, and the no's are in service of that, and it's so much easier. And an aligned life is very, very worth that discomfort. And getting in my body and learning how to discern the difference between safe discomfort and unsafe discomfort has been a game changer as well. And that's why the G in the Gates method is ground. So all that being said, I'm so glad that you're here. Love that you want to learn. And the passive learning phase is absolutely an important step in any personal growth journey. But there's also the active step of integration and implementation, and that's where coaching comes in really handy. And that's why I offer a free Better Boundaries breakthrough call, because I really want to set everyone up for success on this journey. So to book yours, you would go to explorelovingboundaries.com and we'll connect. We'll explore options, and I'll set you up with some resources. Like, no matter what your availability looks like in terms of time or money or attention, we'll find something that will help you. And as the holidays, I feel like right now we're in between, like Thanksgiving just happened, Christmas is coming, New Year's shortly thereafter. So wherever you're at, if holidays are a hard thing for you, don't sit on this, and let's really set you up with some functional foundations that will enhance your relationships and your life. I mean, boundaries aren't just about saying no, they're about reconnecting to your yes so that your no is in service to that. I know you have so much love to give, and I want to see you start receiving it at that level too. So again, head on over to explorelovingboundaries.com and grab your spot on my calendar now. I can't wait to meet you. Wherever you're at on your journey, I send you so much love and courage. Thanks again for tuning in, and please don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. Namaste.